The guy's name is Adam Densmore. He killed his girlfriend and dismembered her. Warning, disturbing content, viewer discretion is advised. People who knew famous serial killers/criminals before they were caught, what were they like? About 10 years before he murdered 2 young women, he came to our house. He was about 16 or 17, on his bicycle with a chipmunk he had hung with a rope and was swinging it around and acting weird. My brother and I were home alone, and it was one time I know my brother was scared. We kept the doors locked. He peed in our grill and left. The whole time he was yelling, but I'm not sure it was at us. I knew too. They both grew up next door to one another. One had emotional problems but could be a decent guy one-on-one. We hung out a bit and rode bikes occasionally. He killed a guy in a drug deal and stuffed the body down a well. The other was a great guy but didn't give a fuck about anyone outside of his circle of friends and his family. We hunted and fished together every day. He once told me he wouldn't feel remorse if he killed someone outside his family. I thought it was just talking. This year his sister's husband started beating her. He ambushed him in a country road and shot him to death. Still a decent guy in my book. He was a loner in one of the biggest schools in the state. He wasn't weird or creepy or smelly or anything, but the popular kids would pick on him. He was friends with my girlfriend. We were going to hang out one weekend, but he bludgeoned his mother to death and ran away with his girlfriend. I spent a summer in Ames, Iowa with some family. Jeffrey Dahmer was a neighbor, a family friend. My cousin and I built a haunted house out of a playhouse in the backyard. Mostly we blindfolded the neighborhood kids and led them through. We had a bowl of grapes with some oil on them and shoved the kids' hands into it and told it was eyeballs. We formed cold congealed spaghetti into what we told them were brains. I personally led Jeffrey through, and every time someone says his name I wonder if I was the cause of his problems. I went to high school with a kid that raped little children on a mission trip he went on. I think the total was about 13 kids. Girls and guys. He was a well-liked kid. I never did anything wrong in high school. He got sentenced to 40 years. He's not famous but still fucked up. Brett Pearson was high on meth and killed his mother, also injuring his father. He cries crocodile tears and acts as he regrets it, but I knew him and know for a fact he doesn't. I went to school with him for a few years. I and others were harassed repeatedly by him in both sexual and violent manners. There was just something off about him. The only friends he had were the problem kids and the major assholes at school. He would make super inappropriate comments in class towards teachers and joked about school shootings and would say things just for shock value. But he was a charmer and got away with everything. I know for a fact he doesn't regret killing his mom. The murder happened only a few blocks from my house. A few years ago, I went to a gas station late at night and ran into an old friend, a guy I knew had been serving time for some heinous shit. He stabbed his father while tripping on LSD. I heard he got out, and he and I were cool, so I didn't think much of it. He was with another dude, and right away the sight of the two of them sitting outside a gas station at a payphone made me uneasy. Teardrop tattoos on their faces, and a desperate look about them. But my friend recognized me right away and came to say what up. His friend immediately asked for a few dollars to get a cigar. I told him to hold up and I'll get him on my way out. The whole time in the store I felt uneasy. It looked like they were looking for a lick, and I didn't want that to be me. So I bought a cigar and have him like $3. I chatted for like 5 minutes with him, asked about his brother and stuff. As I hoped in my car, his friend asked if we could get a ride down the street. I got in and started the car and said, "Nah, I can't." He started to insist, but my friend interrupted him and said, "Nah, my man has somewhere to be, he's got a bunch of kids that are probably crying lol." About 2 weeks later, 2 bodies were found smoldering along a popular jogging trail. The convicted murderer was the guy with my friend. The bodies were found within walking distance of the gas station I saw them at. My friend hung himself about a month later. Both of those guys confessed to friends and family that they didn't know how to act outside of jail and that they didn't feel like they were ready to be out. They tried to check themselves into psych hospitals, complaining of hearing voices, but were turned away. The bodies were 2 high school kids who stole their neighbors' guns and were trying to sell them quickly to get some pot, I believe. They robbed the kids and tied them up for days. This all happened about 5 blocks from where I was living, in a relatively safe neighborhood in Florida. My sister's best friend growing up. Her family was really strict growing up and she kind of took that on with her son. Wouldn't let him watch regular TV, homeschooled, that kind of thing. So she gets married BC, she got pregnant, again BC, she did this with her son's dad, and they move away, she joins the army, he cheats while she's at boot camp, they break up. Then she moves with other relatives in Oregon and eventually, he moves there too to be closer to his child. Breaks it off with the other girl. They start to co-parent well and get along again, everything is okay. They go on a camping trip to the mountains for his birthday with her sister. Then she and the sister proceed to shoot him 13 times while he slept and drags and throws his body off a cliff. They come home to try to cover it all up with fake Facebook alibis and receipts from some gas station, say he gets lost in the woods. The Rangers find him 2 days later and 2 days after that she is arrested along with her sister. Sister flipped on her and they gave her 18 months with time served. She got life without parole. Said she did it to make sure he couldn't take her kids away. Now the kids live with family and have lost both parents. I always knew that family was off. Sister's best friend planned and killed the husband to protect kids and threw him off a cliff, found and convicted, and kids have no parents now. I dated someone who murdered a guy with his friends. It was personal. It did make national news. A few months after we broke up, I was dating someone else. He called me and said that he was never going to be with me because he messed everything up. I was busy and I blew him off. A week later, after a holiday, I got a call from the jail, but it was like 4 a.m. in the morning and I accidentally hung up. A few years later, I looked him up and realized the call was him. I am afraid that he holds a grudge, and as his release creeps closer, I worry. So, what was he like before? Melodramatic. After we broke up, he called me and played Cry Me a River and told me that we were just like the song. He beat himself up a lot. Everything was a big deal. We argued a lot. He was easily influenced. He didn't have a good relationship with his parents. So his friends were all he had. He had a history of disciplinary actions in school. Respect was a huge thing. Feeling disrespected to him was the worst thing in the world. He didn't care about school. He was funny. I worked with a lady that had her husband murdered. She was a bossy, condescending, arrogant piece of white trash. Rather nicely attractive though, and very blunt sexually. She was about 15 years older, but I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it. Wasn't surprised when they finally nailed her for the crime. Everybody suspected she did it. I knew a serial rapist. He was my kid's assistant little league coach, and a great dad. One of the coolest people I knew. He loved his kids, was at all their events, and worked hard as a doctor to support his family. His arrest shocked the shit out of the whole neighborhood. Not a world famous, but well known in my childhood home. I dated a girl in high school whose stepfather raped and murdered a young girl. He looked pretty good for 2 similar crimes, but they never got him on them, and he's maintained his innocence. I only met him briefly, and only once or twice, but he was kind of what you might expect. Quiet, gruff, didn't seem to give a crap about anybody else. I want to say he didn't even shake my hand, or say nice to meet you when I introduced myself. This guy isn't famous, not yet anyway. All this just happened maybe a month ago? Maybe a little longer. The guy's name is Adam Densmore. He killed his girlfriend and dismembered her. He put the body in a couple of suitcases and took their 1-year-old daughter on the road. I always thought he was an intelligent guy, but apparently, he wasn't the smartest, as he immediately drove from where he was living in Colorado to his hometown in NW, Louisiana. Straight to his parents' house. He dropped the suitcases in 2 separate locations along the way. Someone found one of them and he was arrested. As far as I know, they still haven't found the other suitcase. I knew him, but not very well. We used to frequent the same bar. He would sit in the corner with a beer and read. He was rude to anyone who tried to speak to him. Had that whole, "Can't you see I'm reading?" attitude. In most cases I understand that attitude, but not in a bar. Never made sense to me. We talked a few times but only talked at length once. I remember it being an enjoyable conversation. He was intelligent and well-spoken. Also a good-looking guy, but not exactly charming. One thing I remember is he would say "God's" in place of "oh my God." I know he lived somewhere near me because I would see him walking around the neighborhood on occasion. With a big walking stick. So yeah, he was a bit of a strange guy, but I was shocked when I heard about the murder. It still feels weird to realize I know someone who could do something like that. I dated/was friends with a guy who was arrested in a huge CP bust in my area. We'll call him John. He was a very sweet and kind guy, the type who'd do just about anything for a friend. We met at a class and hit it off right away, which led to a short relationship. We split into good terms. We had different ideas about relationships, so we broke up before anyone got too involved. We remained very good friends who would hang out every weekend, spend time at each other's houses playing video games, or just get into general fuckery. About 3 months later, he started dating a girl from his job and took her on vacation to NYC. They had only been dating for a few weeks, but in true fashion, he was head over heels for her. He sent me a picture of them and the girl looked so young I asked if he saw her ID before they slept together. He proudly told me she had just turned 19. He was 43. They split up after she had spent the weekend at his place and her father came looking for her. Her father went ballistic and that was the end of it. I started putting the pieces together and I realized I was looking at one gigantic red flag. I was 27 when we were dating, but he always loved to play up how young I looked. He was also very into age play during sex, which is one of the reasons we split. He started dating girls between the ages of 18 to 21, but they all had the same hallmark of definitely not looking like the age of consent to the point that they were usually stopped from entering clubs/bars because the bouncers assumed the girls had fake IDs or borrowed an older relative's ID. He started drinking more, picking up prostitutes, going to massage parlors, and being all around that creepy old guy. He chalked it up to going through a rough patch, but there was something still very off about him. He went to NYC with another girl and asked me and another mutual friend to watch his house for the week. I get a frantic phone call from the friend saying that John's house had been broken into and all of his electronics were stolen. At the time, I was mid-move and John allowed me to store several boxes of electronics at his place after the storage facility I had them in had been broken into. I went over and sure enough, all of John's TVs, computers, game systems, etc. were gone, but my things were left alone. I found it odd because I had a flat-screen TV and a flat-screen computer in their boxes sitting in his dining room. If he had been robbed, why didn't they take my things? When the cops showed up, all they would tell us was that it wasn't a burglary, but wouldn't give us any more information. That's when I found the search warrant on his kitchen table. John came back from NYC and he asked me to drive him to the state trooper station. All he'd say was that he got a phone call asking him to show up there. Once there, he was immediately arrested, like they met us in the parking lot and yanked him out of my car before I had a chance to put it into a park. One of the detectives asked me to come into the station and they interviewed me, asking how I knew him and so forth. After about an hour they let me go outside to have a cigarette. That's when they told me he was being arrested for 22 counts of downloading/distribution of CP. They also told me it had been going on for a very long time, long enough that surveillance on his house had pictures of me coming and going. So, that's my story. Sorry for the wall of text. I will get lost in all the comments, but I was taught in a pottery class by Margaret Bain and good friends with Stephen Bain when growing up in Papua New Guinea. I don't remember anything unusual about any of the family, but I remember vividly reading in the newspaper in PNG about their deaths in New Zealand. Still not 100% clear whether it was just Stephen's dad or his brother as well that committed the murders. I went to school with someone doing 15 to 30 for killing his girlfriend's baby on St. Paddy's Day because the baby wouldn't stop crying. He was nice, heard his home life was pure shit though. He could lose his temper easy and had some issues in relationships I heard. Was the star goalie on the lacrosse team too, winning a state championship. I didn't know the killer, but as adults, I met a guy and we became good friends. It took him a few weeks to tell me he'd changed his surname as everyone knew his brother and he felt he'd be judged the same. At the time of the murder, it was classed as one of the foulest in Australian history. He told me even though his brother was locked up he was scared of him, and he talked about the constant mental, physical and sexual abuse the children in the family suffered growing up by his father and his cohorts. His brother was your rape and kill animals teenager, a forewarning of what he would become. I lost contact with my friend when he moved interstate and I've tried to find him. I miss him. Gary M. Heidnick used to frequent a bar popular with vets that my grandfather met his friends at a few times a month. He was usually quiet, and on Christmas Eve my grandfather's friend bought the guy a beer and talked to him for a few minutes, thinking he might be a guy with PTSD. Came back and said there is a screw loose with that guy. A few weeks later he got in a fight with someone and my grandfather helped the bartender throw him out. He never came back. Thank you for watching Reddit Space. Please subscribe if you love these Reddit stories.